Okay, today we're going to look at the midpoint of a line and also the length of a line. And you'll find it amazing that what we're going to learn today, there are things that we've learned before which actually relate to this. So we have done a lot of work with lines and linear functions and drawing graphs. Now, finding the midpoint or the length, or finding the midpoint and the length, can also be quite useful. And we can actually use these to do a lot to find out lots of relations about linear functions. Okay, let's look at the following line. Now, pay special attention. I'd like you to pay special attention to the two endpoints, A and B. So if you can see A and B, and also the one in the middle, which is the M, which is marked as M. Now let's start off by writing the coordinates of the point A and B. So point A has coordinates -5 and -5. So it's going 5 places down and also 5 places to the left. And point B has got the coordinates 5 and 15. Okay, now let's have a look at the coordinates of our midpoint, which is point M, which is 0, 5. Well, have a look at what I'd like you to do. Have a look at these coordinates, -5 and 5. Compare that with 0. Have a look at the coordinates, this -5 and 15, and compare that with 5. Now remember, we are talking about midpoints, so midway through. So say for example, you're traveling from one end of the room, we'll just say one end of the room, to the other corner. So one corner of the room to the other corner of the room. If we get halfway, so if the length A to B is say 10 meters, halfway would be how much? 5, exactly. But how do we use coordinates to show halfway? Okay, now what we're going to do is look at it using a triangle, a little triangle. Okay, so if we let's look at the difference between our vertical distance. So vertical distance. So from point A, that's point A. If we want to go up to point B, that's the vertical distance that it goes up to. How far? What is the distance from there to there? Okay, so from there it goes 5 up, then 5, 10, 15 up. So that's a total of 20. So from there to there, that's a distance of 20. Okay? And how about from that point to that point? So it goes 5 across and 5 more, and that distance over there is a distance of 10. Okay. So what can you say about this 10 and 20, and then also the midpoint of 0 and 5? Now, is it the midpoint? So if I want to go from A to B, okay, so vertical distance, halfway there is going from there to there. So half of 20 is actually 10. So we're traveling, hang on. So we're going 10 places up. And then to go from A to B across is 10 places, and halfway is 5. So if we go from -5 to 5, halfway falls on the 0 line. And if we go from -5 to 15, halfway actually falls on the value of 5. So even though if you say half of 20 is actually 10 and half of 10 is 5, but on the coordinates it's whichever point halfway is at. So we can write that. So our vertical distance would be half of 20, and our horizontal distance would be half of 10. Now half of 20 is 10. Half of 10 is 5. Okay, and if you have a look for vertical distance, so half of 20 is 10. That means we have to go, if we go from A, we need to go 10 places up. So 1, that's 5, and that's 10 places up. And then half of 10 is 5, the horizontal distance. So that means we have to go across 5 places. We go across 5 places, and we get to that point, which is our midpoint. So from this, we can come up with a formula or a method to find the midpoint of a line. And the midpoint of a line, so if we say, let's take each of these points, A and B, let's say, because that's an x coordinate, there's 2 points. So if we just write down x and y, that's the x coordinate, that's the y coordinate, that's an x coordinate, that's a y coordinate. Now to differentiate between the two, if we write that as x1 and y1 and x2 and y2, then in that way we can actually differentiate between points A and B. Now how do we find the vertical distance, which is the y, halfway between y, and how do you find the horizontal distance, which is halfway between in the x direction? Now half of 10 was 5, so that means from that point -5 to 5, which is that point -5 to that point 5, how do we get halfway? What do we do with this -5 and 5? So what we do, if you in terms of writing it as a formula, okay, now this point, that's point 0 and that's 5, so we've actually taken the 2 points, -5 we've taken the 2 points of -5, 2 x coordinates, and 5, and we've added them together, and then because it's halfway, we've divided it by 2, which gives us -5 plus 5 is 0, 0 divided by 2 is 0, and that is that point 0. Likewise, for the y coordinates, if we take the y coordinates, -5 and 15, -5 and 15, once we added them, that is how we get our 20. And then we divide by 2, so -5 plus 15 is actually 10. Okay, and 10 divided by 2, oopsie, 10 divided by 2 is not 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so that's how you get your 2 points. So if you have a look, what we've done is we have added the 2 x points, and we've divided that by 2, and we've added the 2 y points, and we've divided that by 2, and that's how we got our midpoints, which brings us to this formula. Now remember, you do not need to plot the line to find the midpoint. All you need to do is you need to have or you need to know what the 2 points are. And let's look at this example for that. It says find the midpoint M, xy, of the line segment joining the points -4, -2, and 2, 0. So let's go back to this equation over here. Okay, now we do need our x1 and x2 and y1 and y2. So let's take these 2 points and let's label that as x1, whoopsies, not x2, x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. So the first thing you want to do is label them. Okay, and then just use the midpoint formula. Midpoint equals x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, because it's a pair of coordinates, it stays in brackets. Let's take our x1 and x2 points, -4 plus 2 divided by 0, and then -2 plus 0 divided by 0. What did I do over here? Not divide by 0, divide by 2. And stays in our brackets. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 2 plus 0 is just negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. So therefore, the midpoint for this line segment is negative 1, negative 1.